if I order it early enough on in the morning with Amazon, I can get it at my apartment delivered in like the same day. I mean, it's totally ridiculous. And so all the other people that aren't Amazon have to compete with that. And it puts so much pressure. And so that's where a lot of this adoption of new technologies is coming in. And
you're listening to the Drone Radio Show podcast, the show about drones and the people who use them for business, fun, and research. Hosted by Randy Goers.
Hello, everyone. This is Randy Goers, and welcome to the Drone Radio Show podcast, episode 237. Can drones be used to make warehouses more efficient? For that question, we turn to Ian Smith, CEO and co-founder of Ware, a company that builds software for indoor drones that autonomously scan and track warehouse inventory. Ian has more than 15 years' experience in the drone industry, having worked at Delair, an industrial-grade fixed-wing drone manufacturer in France, and more recently, DroneDeploy, a leading software company that improves workflows for drone operations. He's an entrepreneur, a commercial helicopter pilot, and host and producer of the successful Commercial Drones FM podcast. In this edition of the Drone Radio Show, Ian talks about how drones are used to improve inventory management and how warehouse operators can use the technology to become more efficient and competitive. But before we hear from Ian, I want to thank those of you who are supporting my funding campaign. Now you have the option of making a one-time donation in any amount by going to DroneRadioshow.com/donate. Whether it's $1, $100, or much more, you can help defray the cost of production and keep the podcast going and growing. And if you'd like to make a monthly contribution, you can still go to patreon.com/DroneRadioshow. So let's learn how drones are used in warehouses with Ian Smith, CEO of Ware. Let's pick up the interview where I ask Ian to introduce himself.
my name is Ian Smith. I am the CEO of Ware, and I also run a podcast about drones called Commercial Drones FM.
Ian, tell us about Ware and what it does.
So Ware is essentially, we're a business that deploys drones inside of warehouses that fly around autonomously to scan and track inventory. So all those big pallets full of boxes that are on those shelves, the industry calls them racks. So we scan pallets that are on racks inside of warehouses. And that's just step one of what we do. Step two is actually processing the data. So we're taking a bunch of pictures and we run it through our Ware cloud, our essentially our algorithms for machine learning and computer vision. And we actually extract insights from those images to pull out things like barcodes, QR codes, human written text, pretty much anything that identifies what pallet is on what rack inside the warehouse. We give it a timestamp, a location. And then the third and final piece of that is actually uploading that data into our client's WMS, which is their warehouse management system. It's essentially their system of record. And that's where they traditionally keep all of this inventory data.
Where did the idea come from?
My co-founder, his name is Joseph Moster. He's actually a drone industry veteran such as myself. He was an early engineer at Airware. A lot of people know Airware. And he was one of the very first, first handful of engineers right before they were going through Y Combinator. And so he has, over 10 years of drone industry experience. I've got like 6 or 7 years. So between us, we've got quite a nice collection of drone industry experience. But unfortunately, it's all been outdoor applications. Like almost every single drone company that I know of or that I talk to over the past 6-7 years has been focused on outdoor applications, and everyone's been chasing after the true value of drones, which is autonomy. And autonomy is heavily regulated in outdoor areas. Obviously, you're in the National Airspace System. The FAA controls that and runs the show in the US, and then other countries, you've got the other rulemaking bodies. And so one of the kind of genesis pieces of Ware is actually within the last 12 to 18 months, and really even more recent than that, drone technology has been, gotten to a point where it's a commodity. It's like cheap. It's cheaper than a lot of other alternative solutions for doing what we're doing for warehouses. It's a lot smarter than it ever used to be. They have all these onboard processors, lots of sophisticated vision systems for collision avoidance and obstacle detection. And the battery life and the size of the drones has gotten a lot smaller, and the battery life has gotten a lot larger. So with all those things combined, and then also not having to worry about a rulemaking body calling the shots like the FAA, since we're operating indoors, the FAA is basically the warehouse operator. It's the warehouse manager, whoever's in charge of that facility says you can fly the drones or not. And in all the cases I've been in, they're more than happy for the drones to be flying around. And so all those things combined, along with just like conversations. I was mentioning my co-founder, Joe. He's the CTO of Ware, and he was having a lot of conversations earlier on when he came from Uber. He was working on the self-driving cars at Uber's ATG unit in Pittsburgh. That was most recent, what he was working on after Airware. And he talked to a lot of people, venture capitalists, and then of course, eventually warehouse folks. And they were mentioning that there's just a big problem there with actually tracking and monitoring inventory inside of warehouses. And believe it or not, warehouses routinely lose stuff inside their own warehouse. I mean, it's not just losing things, it's just not knowing where to put new things. So knowing where things are, knowing where things aren't. And the way that they solved it traditionally, and they solve it today, is just like throwing a bunch of humans at the problem. I mean, hire a bunch of people, make them walk around, especially, warehouses keep growing taller. Then there's a lot of safety concerns because you have to get higher up to look at the inventory and do the counts. And it's just extremely inefficient. It's dull. It's dangerous. It's not dirty like the 3Ds, not the triple D like Guy Fieri, but it's dull and it's dangerous in times. And so all these different things, the inefficiencies, the state of current technology, the lack of regulation indoors, and just like our desire to, be entrepreneurial between Joe and myself and, try to bring this drone technology in a truly autonomous fashion to new industries. Those are all big reasons of why we kind of started Ware and where we're at today.
Now, once you decided to create an inventory management system with drones, what did you have to learn to actually get things moving?
As far as just in general, things that we had to learn, I mean, fortunately, I've had quite a bit of experience in the startup land before at DroneDeploy, kind of doing my own thing with the podcast that I've been running, made that into an LLC. There's a lot of different like random things that you just need to kind of know, and you learn through osmosis and just from really just trying and failing and doing things and starting things up and working on these little projects. Some of the things that are just less obvious are that it's easy to get sidetracked and do stuff that's not going to really truly drive the needle. Y Combinator, a really popular accelerator based in the Bay Area, like companies like Dropbox have gone through there. They advocate that you should only you should have a top level metric that you're always driving your company towards. And that's basically like, if it's not revenue and you're not getting revenue or users, then it's just literally just talking to users. The most important thing you can do is talk to potential customers or users, whatever you want to call them. And so doing that and figuring out where to spend most of your time is really critical. And so like before you actually start these little companies, they're usually like a little side project, like, just like a little twinkle of an idea and, spending some of your time on the side to really truly dive into the problem and see and validate your idea. And so just the best thing that I've learned and that it's been hammered and drilled into my head, and just being in San Francisco and the startup scene for so many years now, it's just like talk to the potential customers, talk to the users, and like always be doing that and validating your idea and like truly listening to what they're saying and asking questions in a way that you're not leading them into one, area that you want them to be in. And so those are the kind of things I think is just very extremely important to know. And so like to get where we're at today, I mean, we just announced that we had an early funding round here filled by Bloomberg Beta. So like Bloomberg has an investment arm called Bloomberg Beta. They invest in early stage companies. They are very effective. I think they did Slack. They definitely did Flexport, which is a unicorn startup doing logistics and supply chain stuff that's now worth multiple billions of dollars. And so they know what they're doing, but like in order for them to invest in us, they had to see some traction. Like we had to show them, hey, we've talked to this many people. This is what we've done to get in the door. And this is where we're at in terms of like customer acquisition and like getting our product out into the world.
Which drones are best suited for what you're trying to do?
So we consider ourselves drone agnostic, but obviously it's a very involved product, lots of moving pieces, lots of autonomy involved. So when I say drone agnostic, it's really going down to basically two manufacturers' platforms. It's DJI, of course, nobody's surprised there, and Skydio. And no one's surprised on that either if they're in the drone industry, if they follow what Skydio does and what they're up to. And so our earliest prototypes are on DJI, and now we do a lot of work with both of those companies.
And the software, is that something you're developing yourself?
So we develop everything in-house on the software side. One distinction about us is that we do not make any of the drones. So just to be very clear there, we are not a drone manufacturer. We have absolutely zero interest in being one and doing that. Both Joe and I have been involved in the hardware side of things with drones and the software side. And we just unanimously agree that hardware is something we don't want to get involved in. So this is one of the reasons why we partner with these best-in-class drone OEMs to build on their robust platforms and their SDKs and APIs. And so our software that goes on top of that, because we're not building any hardware, we're just literally just grabbing the drones and then putting our software on top of it. And that frees us up to truly focus deeply on the software side of things. So for our localization, for indoor navigation and knowing where we are in the warehouse in the absence of GPS, we have to have a robust system that we build for that. And then also for the analysis of the imagery that we're collecting, we also need an extremely robust data set and algorithms that will consistently be learning on the other data that's been trained to identify all the little characteristics from these images that we're looking for and doing it at scale and very reliably. Those kind of things come over time as we capture more and more data and process more data, and we'll be able to get to those insights quicker and, as I said, more reliably. And then finally, getting that data into the customer's WMS that I mentioned earlier, their warehouse management system. It's the most dull part about this, to be honest, but it is the most critical piece that we feel. Like all the fancy stuff that we're doing with the drone flying around autonomously, living on a little nest, charging its battery, waking up on a schedule, capturing all the data, then we process it. All that comes down to distilling the images into text, like literally like a spreadsheet, lines of text, a CSV file. We take that CSV and then we have to get it into the customer's WMS, their system of record for how they manage their warehouse. And it's not trivial. Those systems are like antiquated, they're proprietary, they are on-prem, sometimes not cloud enabled. I mean, so this is like a big part of it, but it's definitely the least sexy part. So that's a huge challenge. And when we can build that stuff ourselves, and when any company can kind of control their destiny there, it pays dividends in the long run. So in the short term, we just have to, weigh our options as far as that goes.
Have you deployed the system or is it still in development?
Yeah, so we are deployed in warehouses today. We've done proof of concepts. We're pretty much in the late pilot stage at this point with some of our big customers. And there's the three main phases: the data collection, the processing, and then getting it into the customer system. The two that are the most critical and require boots on the ground, of course, is the first, which is the drones flying around in the warehouse, the data collection. And then, that's not scalable. You got to get inside the warehouse, boots on the ground, make it happen, find your internal champion at that organization and make sure that they're aligned with your mission too, and that everyone's incentives are kind of in sync. And then making sure that you can, get those drones flying around and test the autonomy and make sure everything works. That's a big hurdle. So that's definitely not to be taken lightly. And then so actually deploying the system to where it's autonomous is another huge challenge, and just getting it running consistently day in and day out.
Looking back to your first client, what was that day like in terms of getting the drones, working with the client, working with their staff? Walk us through that first day.
Good question. I've never really reflected on it specifically. So, well, I'll tell you, the first one, oh man, I reached out to someone on LinkedIn, and this person is the national warehouse manager for a 175-year-old brand, like a company that's that old. They are extremely old company, but that's not to say that you can't teach an old dog new tricks. And he was just really excited about our technology. He was local around us. One thing we learned very quickly is San Francisco doesn't have a lot of warehouses. There's not a lot of space here. The warehouses that are in San Francisco proper are very small. So we had to expand our search outward from there. And so the further out you go, the bigger and better and more badass the warehouses become. So we found this guy, Bill, and he just had us stop by the way. He was like, yeah, come by the warehouse, drive out here. And, we showed up, we had our drones, and it was just really nonchalant, just very easy. We walked in, we put on our safety vest that he gave us, and then, set up a little bit of initial parts of our navigation system so the drone can kind of navigate autonomously and, take all those photos.
How many drones were used?
We used 3 different drones actually that day. We were actually trying to determine, this is the early on. And so we were just using them from, multiple manufacturers, different models, and then trying to figure out get his feedback. One insight that I can share, and it's not groundbreaking or anything, but for me, it was kind of blew my mind. Being around drones for 7 years, my ears are just tuned to the frequency of a drone flying. Even if it's 300 feet away, I immediately know there's a drone in the vicinity, just it's ingrained in me. And I don't like it. The last thing I want is being at a park or something, or being the person flying the drone. So I barely fly outside anymore. But the last thing I want is just a drone buzzing around, because it just gets to me. There was some NASA study or someone who commissioned a study. I covered this a while ago. The noise of a drone is I forget what the statistic was, but they interviewed a lot of people and got a great survey. It was much more annoying than the sound of traffic by a factor of 10 or something like that. So needless to say, I was concerned. My first concern was that the noise of the drones would be too loud for the warehouse, and that I was looking into OSHA regulations and things like that. What is the loudest sustained decibel value that a worker in a warehouse can be around, legally and all that. And we go and we fly, and Bill, I'm watching his expression. He's just watching the drones fly around autonomously. He's wide-eyed and really happy. And I'm so what do you think about that noise, huh? Expecting him to be oh yeah, it's terrible. But he actually just goes, it's quiet. He's it's great. It's really quiet. I'm what? And he just goes on to tell me that it actually could be good that the drone is kind of loud. Certain models are louder than others, of course. He just mentioned as a safety factor, if you think about it, the forklifts that are all around the warehouses going around, zipping around corners. I mean, these guys and gals that drive these things are pros. If you've ever never seen one of these specialists operate these forklifts, and they're just super fast, extremely accurate down to the inch. They could just stop on a dime and pick one up off the ground with their forklift blades. And they have really loud beeps constantly going just for safety purposes. They have blue lights on the floors. So that was one of the crazy things that I learned, is that the noise of the drone actually could be a benefit, and because of safety reasons. But in general, he just thought the drones were quiet.
Do the drones fly in a smooth, continuous pattern as they collect the data? Or do they have to stop at each package to look for a barcode or a SKU number?
So it totally depends on the method of data collection. I'm not going to open up the kimono fully here, but it just depends. So there's a couple ways you can collect data, right? You can do video. So in that case, probably flying at a steady rate, not too fast, and just kind of going making passes all around all the inventory on the racks is probably good. But then with images, still images, you definitely want to make sure that the aircraft is straight and level. You want to make sure there's no blur. There can be challenging lighting conditions inside of warehouses sometimes. So the lower the lighting, the more still the aircraft has to be in order to get a crisp image so you can extract data. So like these are just like common scenarios you'll come across. So you just want to be, whatever proprietary way that a company is going to be processing the data, you just have to think of the best way in order to capture it. So if you're doing video or if you're doing stills, I mean, you can even stick an RFID reader on a drone, those kinds of things. So they're all different ways in which the drone can kind of fly to capture the data.
What are some of the variables that might affect the quality of the data?
With each warehouse that we go to, each new warehouse, they all have slightly different characteristics. And most of it is dependent on the lighting in a warehouse. So like we have a very big customer / partner that we work with, and they have a huge, beautiful, it's just like the sexy warehouse you see in like the stock images. Whenever you're starting a warehouse company, you look through all the stock images and you're like, man, these are beautiful warehouses. Then you go to a lot of warehouses and you're just like, these are not beautiful. These are chaotic and dark. They have a beautiful warehouse, this specific partner. They actually have natural light during the day that comes in through the roof on these like skylights. And it's amazing. It's just so well lit. And so in that case, there is like a small calibration phase where we just want to make sure that, like in the initial setup and implementation, it's basically taken care of. Like we make the settings and we set everything up, and then everything should be good based on the time of day that the drone's going to be operating. So if you just look at the alternative in like a darker warehouse with like motion detecting lights, well, first of all, you got to figure out how do I turn those motion sensing lights on when no one's in the warehouse. If it's like late at night and the drone's flying around, it's not going to pick up the drone because it's so small. It's like a cat in your house when your alarm system's on. The cat's not going to set off the alarm system in most cases, depending on the cat.
Now, after the first baseline inventory is taken, how often are drones typically flown to recheck the inventory?
So again, it all depends on the specific end user. So the really cool thing about this technology and where it really drives these dividends. So like the first way to look at the ROI, before I touch on that, like on like how often the drone has to fly, but the first way to look at it is like, okay, we have humans doing this. We can have the humans do more valuable things like picking stuff, like physically grabbing things and moving it around rather than just looking at stuff in the warehouse. So that's the first way that they look at ROI is like, I can pay less people to do monotonous inventory tasks. The second way we look at it, that's less obvious and it's not as apparent when the customer is first looking at this, is cycle counts more often. And what I mean by that is like cycle counts, usually like a typical warehouse will basically they call it cycle counting. What that means is like over the course of like a couple weeks, they'll like count small sections of the inventory over the course of 2 weeks, and then eventually they'll cover an entire area of the warehouse. And that's like 2 weeks of counting inventory, like basically in sequence, like next. But like all during that 2 weeks, there's inventory moving in, moving out. And so you never actually have like a full overview of everything that's in the warehouse at a specific given time. And so the thing that the drones allow us to do is you can get, depending on the size of your warehouse and how many drones are deployed, you can get full counts of all your inventory every single day, or you can get them weekly instead of bi-weekly. Sometimes warehouses only do this like once a quarter or even like once or twice a year. And so the amount of data that they can have and like the state of their warehouse from an inventory's perspective is a huge value booster for them for this technology. So it really depends though on the client, the size of the warehouse, and their operation that they're running on how often they want everything counted and how often the drones run. So like on average, we're looking about weekly.
Are the drones fully autonomous? I mean, do they sit in the warehouse and wait for the next time to take the inventory and then fly off and do it themselves?
Not quite yet. No. So that takes a bit more time after the initial mission there. I mean, usually, it's like a proof of concept. Let's make sure, hey, let's prove to you that this works, that like we say it does. And then let's deploy it as a pilot program for a certain determined period of time that's agreed upon by both parties. And during that pilot period time is when kind of everything is going to be implemented and ready to go for like, the full integration and everything kind of firing on all cylinders autonomously. So it is a little bit of a process, but like this is just part of the early stages of a business, especially doing what we're doing. It's only just going to increase in velocity over time on how quick we're going to be able to get from like first call, I guess, like first customer contact to full like autonomous deployment in their warehouse. lots of steps in between. But again, as we go on in time, we're going to be shortening each one of those as much as we can to optimize how quick we can get value to the customer's hands.
Is there a machine learning component with the drones where they're continuously learning about their environment?
We apply machine learning capabilities essentially more in the data processing side of things. So not about just the autonomous navigation of the drone. That's like, I mean, it's definitely not dumb, but like compared to what we're doing on the image processing side of things, the way that the drone navigates indoors is a lot more like caveman style software stuff, I guess. It's like the only kind of metaphor that I can come up with right now, but it's just a lot more straightforward. There's a lot less variables. There's no like, oh, I'm going to learn how to do this better at this point. Like in the future, we're going to be, making it a lot smarter, and ideally we can apply some machine learning, but actually at this stage, we really just wouldn't want to. It just wouldn't be effective. It introduces lots of margin for error. And so in the case of like the drone flying, it just needs to be as simple as possible. And that's what we're going for there. But on the data processing side, like, we're QCing and, quality assurance, QA, QC, all the data that's coming through before it goes into the system, and just making sure it's all good until we reach like a level of confidence of a certain percentage. We're just kind of monitoring it. But over time, it gets closer and closer to the point where it's just like fully autonomous. And then the goal, of course, is to have the world's largest data set of indoor inventory data, a visual data set of those assets.
So what are the next steps for Ware?
We are actively accepting, well, let me rephrase that. We are actively denying, I guess, requests to go to warehouses and deploy. So like there's a lot of hype and stuff, and it's really exciting. Like we're super excited, of course, but I've been around drones for long enough now. Like my approach is just very transparent, very straight and to the point. We're not promising anything that we can't do, and we will not do that as long as we're a business. And so today we're really focusing on the US market specifically. So we've had a lot of international interest coming inbound. And so I've had to be, very adamant and saying, look, I'm sorry, it sounds like a great opportunity, but we got to do well in the US first. So that's where we're at today with these pilots, and then transitioning to those first, longer term contracts with these customers. But then eventually we do want to expand internationally. I mean, there's huge opportunity throughout the world. There's hundreds of thousands of warehouses, and a lot of them are just like not in this automated. They haven't embraced technology. I mean, it's been an industry that's been slow to embrace new technology. And I could kind of liken it to construction. Like if you ever, I know you've had guests on your show that are working on construction software and applying drones to that. And like construction's kind of going through this renaissance of just all this new technology, like everything being digitized. No more blueprints that you roll up and spread out over a huge table and you get frustrated because it keeps rolling back up on you. Applying drones to get aerial imagery that's way cheaper than the cost of a helicopter or an airplane, and all this different stuff. And so warehouses right now, and it's not just for their inventory. We're focusing on a very specific part of the warehouse operation and the shipping and receiving and the whole like global supply chain. They are being disrupted from all different angles, from every way that they operate. And so they're kind of like ripe for disruption at this point. That's just what we're seeing in the market. And so from where we're at today, we're just expanding along even further around that in terms of geography, but also in terms of our own capabilities as a company and the features and products that we provide to them. So very, very exciting times.
Yeah, definitely exciting and very timely too. Just recently, I sat through a session of facility managers talking about smart applications. One of the speakers was talking about how large companies like Amazon and their commitment to 1 day or less shipping has really placed a huge demand for smart inventory solutions. Packages have to get out of warehouses much quicker in order to meet those demands, and the only way to do it is through some sort of inventory management system.
Exactly. Yeah, you nailed it. I mean, the margins are already thin for these businesses, first of all. So like a lot of the big ones are the only ones who can really afford to innovate and run these programs and invest in this technology and really investigate it. So they'll be the earlier adopters. But then you'll see like, the long tail come along. But that's exactly what we see in the market. I mean, Amazon has put so much pressure on every single possible business out there in so many ways. But one of the biggest is the consumers' expectations are very high now. Like way back in like 2010, 2-day delivery was like incredible. Today, it's like if I order it early enough on in the morning with Amazon, I can get it at my apartment delivered in like the same day. It's kind of ridiculous. I mean, it's totally ridiculous. And so all the other people that aren't Amazon have to compete with that. And it puts so much pressure. And so that's where a lot of this adoption of new technologies is coming in. And so it's really cool to be a part of it and to really see and be working with these companies that do compete against Amazon. We completely ignore Amazon. We have no desire at this point to talk to them or to work with them. It's just, they're on a whole nother planet than everyone else. They're just the behemoth, and they've got so many systems, and it's crazy and impressive what they've done. But it's really cool. Just like, I feel like we're like a David versus Goliath, like us and the rest of the industry versus Amazon.
How do you characterize your evolution through the drone industry?
I started flying helicopters on the civilian side and then transitioned into drones, into jet fuel and all that stuff. And like, to me, it's just a natural transition. But I remember just saying to myself one day back in 2012 or 2013, whatever it was, that I was just going to like make this a thing about drones. And I was able to do that with working at Delair on the hardware side, then DroneDeploy on the software side, and then doing the podcast, which was inspired by you. And I'm coming up on 100 episodes. I mean, I don't know. I've touched a lot of different areas: hardware, software, outdoor, indoor, different industries. The coolest thing really is just like learning from people, having these conversations. Learning this new industry is just fascinating. I just love discovering all the little quirks and the way that people think about their business. And I just love B2B stuff much more than I'm passionate about like consumer side. I just love working with other companies. It's like very straightforward. You know what everyone kind of wants. And so it makes things a little easier, at least for me. But to characterize it, I don't know, man. It's just been a wild ride, really exciting, ups and downs all over the place, but like cool breakthroughs, and just seeing the industry grow and being a part of it and participating has been just like really, really awesome. I can't imagine doing anything else.
Now, there have been a lot of challenges for many drone companies in the past couple of years, but you still feel it's a good time to start a new drone company.
We don't consider ourselves a drone company. How many drone companies have you heard say that? It's just so funny. It's like everyone kind of says that. But like for us, the drone is a camera, and it's a camera we can put in an XYZ coordinate in different areas of inside a building right now. Like when we go away from drones, we will find, different sources of data elsewhere. And so that's actually like in the fundraising aspect of things, which is a lot of like a big challenge for a lot of new companies, is to try to get funds for building this kind of technology. It's just important to really like stick to your guns and to make sure that you know the long-term vision of your company, that you're doing something that's valuable, that you've talked to enough users, you've validated the problem, the pricing, the market, the need for the technology, and the appetite for it. So like right now, it's cool because like I mentioned, like supply chain and logistics is a really hot, traditionally it's been a very unsexy industry, but now with like companies like Flexport and some others just like kind of upending the way things have been done with international trade and moving freight around, there's like a big investor interest in this. Also, e-commerce is just growing like crazy. So anything with e-commerce happening, it's like double-digit growth every year, year over year for the past, I don't know, since it's been around or something. So that's like driving a lot of things. So that really helps us, is because our application, we're not just starting up another like construction aerial drone analytics company or something like that.
In your pitch to your clients, how long into it do you go before you mention that drones are involved?
So it's interesting. We did, I don't know, I guess a couple different ways. Usually it's very, very, very close to the beginning, if not the first thing that they hear. It's like, I mean, if you rewind back to what I said in the beginning about how we describe ourselves, it's that we deploy drones inside of warehouses to autonomously scan and track inventory. But when we dive deeper and we look into the problem more and the opportunity for, growing the business, they realize there's a lot more opportunities out there, that the drone for us can be a go-to-market vehicle, essentially. An industry like warehouses and distribution centers, like they do see robots lately, but a lot of them aren't flying. I mean, we do have competitors out there. We are taking a fundamentally different approach than them, which we believe is going to be more successful. But this technology is still pretty new. So at least from the customer's perspective, sometimes it can just get them excited because, ooh, drones, like flying things, it was the same thing for all the other outdoor industries. But then with investors, of course, there is like a little bit of polarization on like, oh, not another drone company, with all this consolidation that had happened. And yeah, I mean, I should probably stop there because I could just keep ranting on and on about that.
With all your experience, plus the nearly 100 interviews you've conducted in your podcast, what's your perspective on the drone industry today?
The coolest little like proof point I have on that is a story. So I was just recently, a week ago, I was at, so my company, I spent almost 4 years at DroneDeploy. I was a very early employee there. They have been doing a DroneDeploy conference. I think this was their 4th user conference. So this is primarily for outdoor drones, and like a lot of interesting things there. Number one, there was like hundreds of people, like almost 400 people, I think, came from all around the world. There was people from Australia, from Africa, from Europe, from South America. I mean, you name it, from Asia. There was different companies everywhere, but there was also like the whole contingent of like the usual suspects, like the technology partners. So there was hardware manufacturers there, DJI, there was FLIR that was there. They do sensors for thermal imagery. I mean, like you're kind of seeing DroneDeploy bubbling up to the top. And I'm not just saying that as a shareholder. I'm just saying like you can't deny it at this point. But the cool thing was that like there wasn't a lot of hype there. Like it was like business. It was like a normal business conference. Like it was still exciting, still drone related, still software, still cool. But like you're seeing all these businesses with like they have clients with like hundreds of drones deployed now. And like these things are being used as tools, like they're meant to be, like how we were trying to start out. Like drones aren't toys, they're tools, like for, business purposes. So that was just really amazing to see, along with this whole ecosystem that was built around the company that I can kind of say I played a nice part in. But it was also exciting in the fact that like you see Skydio that goes there to announce their true autonomous like capabilities with their new drone platform, the Skydio 2, and then their little, I forget what they call it, the box. No, that's not a box. I used to call it drones in a box. Now they call it, I don't remember, but it's basically the little box that the drone lives in. And then it, wakes up and it goes out and it lands and all that stuff, recharges its batteries. So they chose that conference to announce that. So I think Mike Wynn, the CEO of DroneDeploy, did like a slide, and the Gartner hype cycle has just been beaten to death in the drone industry. And it's so funny because like the trough of disillusionment is basically where like all the hype is gone, no one's enthused anymore, and like the industry kind of hums along with not a lot of growth. And I have seen and personally talked to people and said this myself for like the past 3 years. We always think we're in the trough of disillusionment. And I think it's just so funny because we just haven't gotten out of it. And I think we always thought, oh, the next year will be different. We'll be out of the trough and going back up to the plateau of productivity. But I think that the industry kind of is in that trough. Maybe it's in the plateau of productivity. Honestly, I don't really know. I mean, that's all just like public perception, but also like the client's perception. Today, you just can't deny that there are lots of businesses with growing drone programs that see the value, and even in the face of regulatory uncertainty and not being able to do truly autonomous missions easily outdoors without a waiver or a pilot beyond visual line of sight, you're still seeing them growing like crazy and adopting this technology like net new as well. I have friends that are on the sales team at DroneDeploy. They talk to customers all the time, and like new customers, new industries, all over the place. So I've just completely contradicted myself because now I'm wondering, after saying all that, are we in the plateau of productivity? But the truth is I have no idea where we're at.
Well, you sound very excited about where you're at. And I think that's the important point. It's where each person sees themselves in relationship to the opportunities.
I think so, yeah. I mean, not my favorite thing, but like drones should be boring. I've been saying this for years. Just because I come from, traditional manned aviation, like, you wish someone like a boring flight, like that kind of thing. Like like, hope it's not exciting, like you just get, from where you're going to where you are with no hiccups in between. And like, I always was just like, yeah, drones should be just like boring, like little tools. Like a hammer is not exciting, but it gets the job done. That's where I think drones are today. And it's just really cool seeing the ways and the different environments and industries that we can affect with these little flying robots.
And for my final question, Ian, what message would you like to leave regarding the use of drones in inventory management?
If you're affiliated with a warehouse that is interested in this kind of technology, check out our website. The cool thing about this is like, you don't realize how much warehouses affect our daily lives. But like when we click that buy now button, all these robots in an Amazon warehouse just like, spin up and start grabbing stuff and moving things around. It's easy to just forget that like our whole lives are so dependent on this like deep supply chain and all this logistics happening with these warehouses that store everything. I looked at my house the other day, my apartment, and I was just like, did anything in here not come through a warehouse? Like anything. And I can't find a single thing unless it's like a piece of fruit or something from a farmer's market. But then again, the tools that were used to cultivate that piece of fruit also came through a warehouse. So then you're just like in this like scenario where like everything we use and we use to live our lives goes through these warehouses. So like everyone's connected to somebody in this kind of industry, in the logistics, supply chain, warehousing, distribution center, whatever. So if anyone's interested in that, like definitely check out our website. It's getware.com, GETWARE. Give us a shout. Ping me, Ian@getware.com if there's some interest here. Again, international folks, I'm sorry, you can ping me, but like it might go into the back burner and we'll get back to you when we can. But like we're just interested in learning more about the industry, always talking to new customers and seeing how we can make a difference with the technology for different operations so that they can operate better and we can all just keep getting our stuff quicker and quicker that we need.
That's it for episode 237 of the Drone Radio Show. I hope you enjoyed hearing from Ian Smith of Ware. I want to thank Ian for taking the time to speak with me. If you want more information about Ware or want to connect with Ian, check out the webpage at getware.com. And don't forget to check out Ian's Commercial Drones FM podcast. If you like the Drone Radio Show, please consider supporting the podcast with a small donation. The content is always free, but for as little as $1, you can help defray the cost of production. To donate, go to DroneRadioShow.com/donate or Patreon.com/DroneRadioShow. And thanks for listening. Your support means a lot to me, and I hope you'll listen to more episodes of the Drone Radio Show podcast to hear how others are using drones for business, fun, and research. For the Drone Radio Show, I'm Randy Gord.
This has been the Drone Radio Show podcast. More information on today's show can be found on our website at www.droneradioshow.com. If you're using drone technology for business, fun, or research and would like to share your experience on the show, please visit our website and fill out a guest appearance application. And don't forget to follow us on your favorite social media channels.